Thank you. Okay.
First time journalist I knew who became a politician.
Well, there are many in the U.S.
Oh, yeah, these days, yeah.
Outside Lechco. Today we switched to the Pearl channel because my guest today does not speak very good Cantonese, so I think we better stick to English. And it's Professor Keith Richburg, and he wears two hats. He's the president of the Foreign Correspondents Club and also the director of the Journalism and Media Studies Center at the Hong Kong University. So there's a lot that we can talk about. We can talk about journalism and we can talk about academia. So thank you very much, Keith, for coming on.
No, 少少 廣東話
No, I don't allow people to speak Chinglish.
Okay.
And then if you want to speak put Cantonese as well. So anyway, thank you very much, Keith, for coming on. And you have now become the president of the FCC again. When were you last president?
1997.
Really?
Yeah, 97. So it seems whenever there's something big happening in Hong Kong, they ask me to be president.
Hey, Keith, come and help us. Was it very difficult to find someone to do the job? I know Jody. Jody
was here. She
has to go back
she had to go back to New York. She's got a big job there. She's covering all the vaccine rollout. She's in charge of the coverage for Bloomberg News. And we looked around. We had a lot of younger people, but a lot of them were going to be so busy now with covering the news story that they said they didn't think they could have time to do it. And I've done it before.
They're not afraid.
No, I wouldn't say they're afraid. We had a few people whose offices told them that maybe it's better not to do it now. Concentrate on your day job. We're lucky at HKU because I teach, but we don't have any courses over the summer months. In fact, we're finished now, so May, June, July, August, we don't have any teaching
I see.
to do. So I've got a little bit more time on my plate, and I've done it before, so I kind of know what the job entails, etc. So I told them I'll do it for a while, but then they can find someone, maybe to be on the board who can take over later. So I said I'll be Joe Biden, but we have to find a Kamala Harris to come up.
You're not 78, are you?
Not quite that old, but I feel like it sometimes.
But what is the difference between being the president now in 2021 and 1997?
Oh, well, it's very similar in a lot of ways. I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty in 97, and nobody knew quite what to do, and they were looking around for somebody. I had not been in Hong Kong very long. I'd only been here for a couple of years. But they said, we probably need somebody to be president who maybe is from a major news organization.
And that was Washington Post.
That was Washington Post at the time. I was the correspondent here for the Washington Post. They said we probably need a big name news organization at the time. And maybe because of the transition from British to Chinese rule, maybe it's better if it's not a British president.
Better not a Chinese.
Better not a Chinese, better not a British. So you're American, you're kind of right neutral there, etc. And it was, I was already on the board, and I was already on the events planning committee we call professional committee. So it was an easy step. And I told them, look, I need to have a good vice president behind me. That was the late Diane Stormont, who was with Reuters. And so this time, the time then, nobody knew what to expect. And so we, at the FCC, because I came in May, the handover was end of June. So one thing that we did while I was there is we just made the FCC a center for everyone to come through and speak. And so we had Martin Lee come through, and Jasper Zhang, and everybody from all sides just came through. You had hundreds and hundreds of visiting journalists. So we decided, let's make the FCC the one place that they know they can come. All the people you want to see will come through here. We had 2 press conferences every day, one for the month leading up to the handover, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. We had panel discussions, so it became kind of a beehive of activity.
Not anymore, huh?
Oh, well, the problem this time is, first of all, with the COVID restrictions, nobody's coming in. It was pretty amazing in 2019 during the protests. Hundreds of journalists were coming in from all over the world, but it's been really amazing since the last year. I haven't seen any of the other journalists from around the region because they can't get here unless they have a Hong Kong ID card. And even if they do, they would have to do 14 or 21 days in quarantine. So people have been covering it from outside of Hong Kong, which is not good. But the people based here, including some of my students, have been getting a lot more opportunities to cover things.
But is it true that it's difficult for foreign correspondents to come to Hong Kong now? apart from COVID?
Well, the main thing is the visiting correspondents can't come in and out because you can't just fly into Hong Kong now without some kind of a work permit or a visa. So far, knock on wood, there haven't been too many cases of foreign correspondents trying to be based here who have been told they can't come here.
Except the Financial Times guy.
Well,
Victor
Mallet was kicked out for other reasons a few years ago. There was someone who was trying to get a job working for Hong Kong Free Press. I think he was Irish citizen, and he couldn't get a visa approved in time.
Yeah.
And then there was Chris Buckley from the New York Times who came down from Beijing and then could not get the permit approved in time to stay here and work, so he ended up going to Australia, where he's from.
Yeah.
But those are the only cases I've known of. There were some holdups. For a few months, people were worried about journalists not getting visas. All the major agencies, or most of them, had people waiting for visas. But eventually they all got cleared through.
So that's not yet a problem?
Not yet. hopefully never. Hopefully never.
Oh, not yet a problem. So what is a problem? I read about you writing to the Commissioner of Police.
Yes.
What was that about?
Well, that's one of the things you have to do as the FCC president. You sign a lot of letters. So, that was actually drafted by our Press Freedom Committee, and I put my name on it as the president of the club, because the police chief came out and was very much complaining about fake news. After their National Security Education Day, or whatever it was called, they had these children playing with toy guns. And I think one of the papers, I think it was Apple Daily, ran a photograph that showed those children playing with toy guns juxtaposed next to a photo from the Prince Edward situation from 2019. So the police chief came out and he said, oh, that's fake news. And we have to do something about all this fake news floating around and disinformation floating around. So when we started hearing fake news, we started thinking, at the FCC, on the Press Freedom Committee, we started thinking, wait, hold on a second here. What does this mean, fake news? First of all, there was nothing fake about the photo.
Yeah.
You could argue that that was in bad taste to put the photos together or whatever, but they were legitimate photos.
It was a Reuters photo.
There's Reuters photos, so there's nothing fake about the photos. So what's he talking about? What's fake news? And first of all, the police don't pass laws. The police, implement the laws that are there. So it's not for the police chief to say that, there's going to be a crackdown on fake news. He can't do that. If the government's thinking of passing a fake news law, we need to know what it is, what they're planning. We've seen how these laws have been misused around the region. You look at Singapore, you look at Cambodia, you look at Myanmar, where they use fake news laws to arrest journalists, so-called fake news laws.
Isn't it?
Thailand has a fake news law as well. These things are basically just used by authoritarian governments to stifle information they don't want to get out. Now, there is a problem of disinformation that does float around on the internet, etc. If they want to talk about some ways to combat that, we're all ears. And that was the point of my letter, saying, look, we teach courses at HKU on how to combat fake news and disinformation. Talk to us.
Come and be a part-time
Come talk to us, ask us our opinions. We're actually thinking of having a conference up there on, how do you tell what's fake news and what's real news and what you should do about it.
Well, you should invite the CP to be a speaker.
Absolutely, absolutely. We will, absolutely. And we'd love police chief to come to the FCC and explain what he's talking about.
They never did.
They have a standing invitation. I am confident that I will continue to ask. I'm confident I'll continue to ask. I hope to see them. Because, the FCC, as you know, has always been open to everybody. We've had people from all sides. We still have people from all sides.
Including the guy who got you into trouble.
Including the guy who got us in trouble. We had CY Leung in the past. They had Zhu Rongji. And all kinds of folks coming through the FCC. So it's always been a platform where anybody could come and speak, etc. And I think that's what people misunderstand. They say, well, how come you have this person, who's critical of the government? We invite government officials to come. They don't always take us.
They seldom come.
They seldom come, but when they do, we're very happy to have them. They have a standing invitation.
Is there a concern that the lease, which would expire next year, that you may be kicked out of the current premises?
Well, it expires in 2023, so we're not really...
23?
23, we're fine.
We'll
not be under my presidency. I'm confident we're doing everything to be good citizens, and take care.
Did someone warn you that you better start looking for a new home?
No, we're confident we're going to be there for a while. We hope and trust, because we're doing everything to upkeep our building and upkeep our lease and be good tenants. I'm very proud of this, by the way. We did not, we suffered under COVID with the restrictions. We had to shut down early. We did not lay off a single member of our staff. We kept everybody on.
Really?
Including the musician down in the Bert's bar, even though we have not had live music. So
But you have very good business. I'm there 2 or 3 times a week.
Oh yeah, well now, but
but
don't forget, we were closing at 6:30. We were forced to close at 6:30 for a long time.
I know,
When that,
but not anymore.
Not anymore, but still closing at 10. We used to stay up until 2. And, the 4-person per table, and we're not allowed to have banquets upstairs.
No.
That was a big deal. We could rent out our rooms upstairs to have large banquets, birthday parties, anniversaries, office parties. That's been a huge cut in revenue. But fortunately, as I mentioned, our staff is the real key to the club, and we did not lay off a single staff member.
Well, that's very good.
We've tried to do some things in the community, so we think we've been good tenants, and so we don't think.
And you hope you won't be kicked out.
We don't either. I think they all know we're there. We've been a part of Hong Kong's society since 1949.
But what about journalism in general?
Yeah.
Because if you look at the Hong Kong Journalists Association and others, they have almost press conference every day to talk about the problems.
Yes.
So you are aware of the problems faced by local journalists.
Absolutely, I know.
And you have to teach your students at the university.
Absolutely. So most of our students go into local media here too. Look,
some of them are watching you now.
Absolutely.
What do you think of the developments here? Is it very, very concerning, very disturbing?
It's very concerning. Look, I know Chris Young and I know Hong Kong Journalists Association very well. They're our friends and our partners. We had Chris Young over to the Fcc just last week or so to talk to our Press Freedom Committee, because we think foreign correspondents, local correspondents, we're all on the same, we're all on the same side, we're all in the same fight. So look, it's very, very concerning, and there have been a series of things that I find very worrying about press freedom in Hong Kong. And most of it is affecting the local reporters more than it affects the foreign reporters, but it affects all of us, as I said, because we're all in this together. And again, there's not one big thing I would look to, but I'd say there have been a bunch of little things.
Such as?
I call it death by 1,000 cuts. Bao Choi from RTHK being charged for doing something that journalists here, I'm told, have routinely done. I mean, I never had to do it, but journalists routinely do it, which is go to the public vehicle records and check license plates. I mean, that's not something considered terribly unusual. So that's one thing. The other journalist from RTHK, Nabella Koser, basically forced to leave. Why? Because she asked tough questions at a press conference at Carrie Lam.
That's terrible.
Oh my God, asked tough questions. Wow.
I think Donald Trump would like to fire
that's right,
the whole press corps.
Another RTHK journalist resigned, we say resigned, and then is leaving because she asked the WHO person about Taiwan at a press conference. A legitimate question, I thought. But again, people say, oh no, she should not have asked the question, so therefore, so she's in trouble now. Then you see this the new head of news at RTHK, Patrick Lee, I think his name is, who was a top civil servant. No journalism experience as far as I know. And he's been axing programs or axing episodes of programs, saying they're not, quote unquote, not balanced. That's been a problem with public broadcasters all over the world, with VOA in America and Radio Free Asia. The Trump administration thought they weren't being loyal enough to his agenda. Every conservative every government in the UK always thinks BBC should be promoting their policies and not be so critical. So that's always been a constant theme. But I would hate,
not like here.
Not like this, where they're just coming in and just axing programs and axing episodes. I think you were on one that was axed.
Exactly.
Well, exactly. So that's worrying and that's troubling. And then you look at one of the things that I'm really concerned about for my students and for the journalists at the FCC is this the shrinking of the space for public data. They're starting to say, for example, public data, you can't go into the company's registry at some point if they have their way, and you won't be able to look up ID numbers or residential addresses. Now, some people who don't, it's a very arcane issue, but some people don't understand how important that is. There are a lot of people with the same name in Hong Kong. But the one thing that Hong Kong has that other countries, including the US and others, don't have is you have this unique identifier, which is your Hong Kong ID number. So I can tell that this Emily Lau, who I'm looking for, is not this other Emily Lau over here. See, we need to be able to see the ID number. We need to be able to differentiate people. And it's important for transparency. It's important for investigative journalism because if you're checking out companies, if you're trying to check out corruption, if you're trying to check out who's sitting on the board of what company and who's connected to who, you need to know who people are. And the only way you can do it is if you've got that unique Hong Kong ID card number. especially because people deliberately try to obscure their names.
Yeah.
They try to spell it, if they're coming from the mainland, they might try to spell it in the Cantonese way, change a letter here or there, use an English name here or there. But Hong Kong has that unique Hong Kong ID number, which is a unique identifier. People can't hide around. That's important for journalism, that's important for investigative reporting, it's also important for forensic accountants, it's important for bankers.
Yeah.
And you're going to see corruption explode if people can kind of suddenly be on boards and companies and people on each other's cross directorships, etc. And journalists aren't able to dig that stuff up.
And Carrie Lam doesn't seem to care.
I don't know why they're even doing this. This is something they tried to do a few years ago. There was some outcry from people like David Webb, the open data, enthusiast and warrior. This is something that doesn't need to be done. They should be doing more. They should be doing more to open data here. Hong Kong doesn't have a Freedom of Information Act. There's no archives law, so government records can just disappear.
And they have disappeared.
And they have disappeared the same way as RTHK television programs can certainly disappear.
Suddenly, yeah.
So things suddenly can just disappear because there's no archives law. RTHK is a public entity. So if there was a Freedom of Information Act or a Public Records Act or all this, those shows should be archived somewhere for the public good.
And then there was this raid at the Apple Daily, huh?
Then you had the Apple Daily raid, you had the arrest of Jimmy Lai, marched through his newsroom in handcuffs. I mean, I understand, police do their thing, but look, if you want to arrest Jimmy Lai, you call his lawyer and you say, hey, have Jimmy here at 9 o'clock in the morning, That's how you arrest people. Why do you need to go in with that heavy show of force? And we saw video of police looking on notebooks and looking on people's desks and all of this sort of thing. And, so you see all of these things going one by one, and you say, each one of these things can be justified on its own, but you look at it in totality, and you say, boy, this is a real kind of crackdown.
And the mass resignation at the cable TV news.
You've got mass resignations there, and then the things you hear coming from government officials. Nothing supporting press freedom. In fact, they seem to say, well, press freedom doesn't give you the right to do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do the other thing. And government officials in the executive's office talking about fake news and talking about we got to do something about all this fake news.
It's on Carrie Lam's agenda.
It's on her agenda. We know something's coming. Again, I'm heading a journalism program at HKU and nobody's told me about it. You'd think they would want to at least get my opinion about it.
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
I haven't heard a thing about it. I said, we teach classes on disinformation and how to combat it.
Well, you have to offer your opinion, even if they
We will do that. We'll be offering our opinion. And that's what our letter to the police chief was about, which people misunderstand. Why are you writing to the police? Because he said they're going to start prosecuting fake news. Well, how? There's no law. What are you talking about here? So all of these things, and plus there's this, I've noticed lately, there's this attitude where government officials seem to think that any type of criticism is, and this word that they use, smearing.
Yeah.
If you raise questions about the Sinovac vaccine, why are you smearing the vaccine? If you raise questions about the new electoral reforms, changes, whatever, why are you smearing? Why are you smearing the electoral reforms? They don't seem to want any kind of criticism. Any kind of criticism is taken as smearing or insulting or.
So Hong Kong's ranking on the world stage of press freedom is dropping and dropping and dropping.
I'm shocked they're at number 80. I thought they'd drop further than that, but I guess the ranking came out before a lot of the things in 2021. I think they just measured mostly 2020. But yeah, look, and I think it was at number 18, not too many years ago.
So that is a salutary lesson for all of us, isn't it? You can be doing quite well, and just within 1 or 2 years or whatever, boom.
Yeah.
You're down there.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm not sure people in power care where their press freedom ranking is. I think what they care about is control. They care about, as they've said, and again, this is another thing I heard coming from, people in the pro-establishment side saying we need patriots running the news media. What does that mean?
Patriots.
I mean, everybody's a patriot.
Yeah, of course.
Everybody's a patriot. I'm a patriot. Everybody's a patriot. But it doesn't even mean anything. These vague terms. But I mean, again, we're all national security law is now the law of the land. We have to obey it. Everybody knows that. But it says in the national security law that they have to improve the supervision of the media. And that's not supervision of the media. And that's not really explained what that means. Supervised by who and for what reason?
Well, not by you and me, of course.
Well, probably not. So that's why, again, it's a bit vague. so many things are vague.
So what do you tell your students then? Do you tell them to still want to go into journalism
Absolutely.
after they graduate?
You know, well, it's up to individuals to decide whether they want to stick with it, but I'd say, look, keep on keeping on. Nothing changes. Full steam ahead is my message. Look, we have to operate under the new system, as I mentioned. First thing I teach any journalist anywhere is you obey the law, wherever you are. If you're in Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, they all have different laws. They all have different restrictions on what journalists can do and can't do. Europe has restrictions on what you can report from courts, or you can't use Nazi symbols in newspapers in Germany. That's illegal. In Indonesia, Malaysia, you can't blasphemize the Prophet. You can't say anything about Prophet Muhammad. I understand that. In Thailand, you can't insult the king. So every country has its laws. Now Hong Kong has its laws. So the first thing is we have to recognize what these laws are. It would help if it was spelled out a little more specifically what you could and could not do for journalists. It's left a bit vague. And the court cases now, there's no court precedent because this is all new. So journalists are a little bit not knowing where these red lines are. I mean, just look at it. If you dig down a little deeper, we know it's terrorism, subversion, secession, and collusion with foreign forces. Everybody knows that. I saw the little cartoon owl singing that for the TV for the children in schools. Okay, terrorism. I don't know any journalists who are terrorists, so leave that one off the books. Secession. Well, journalists, as far as I know, when I'm teaching impartial, independent journalism, they're not advocating secession or anything like that. They might be reporting on activities of people who are talking about that or reporting on Xinjiang, but they're not advocating secession. So I would just say, don't even worry about that. Subversion of state power. Well, that's a bit vague, but I don't know any journalists who are out there trying to overthrow anything. They're covering stories. They're trying to tell stories, right? So, I mean, again, if you just look at it strictly, journalists are just not activists or advocating things. They're just out there trying to really explain things, tell stories, get underneath things, etc. Collusion with foreign forces. And I'm not 100% sure what that means exactly, but do we take money from foreign organizations? Well, sure, right? So you're going to ban foreign money coming into Hong Kong? Hong Kong's an open city. So is it some organizations or what organizations? What's the purpose of it? As long as foreign money is supposedly not coming in. If it's coming in to do research or coming in to help fund projects, that's one thing. If it's trying to overthrow the government and support terrorism, okay, I think every country in the world would probably have a law against that. But again, they're not very specific. And that's what journalists are worried about. But what I tell journalists and journalism students is, know what the laws are. I don't think you're disobeying any national security laws, so don't worry about it. Do your job. Tell your stories. Be aggressive. Be as tough as you can be.
But they are very scared. Or some of them, anyway.
Some are, again. But I tell them, look, it's full steam ahead, because unless you're doing something illegal, unless you're out there advocating something or advocating terrorism or secession, which I know you're not, don't worry about it. The biggest problem is going to be self-censorship.
Yeah.
The biggest problem is people not knowing where these red lines are. So they're saying, well, I better not go near that topic. It might be too sensitive. And I said, no, go near the topic. Just keep going until somebody tells you to stop.
Maybe it's too late.
Well, I don't think so. I don't think they're going to go out and run off after a journalist because they're trying to report on whether or not the Sinovac vaccine is working or whether BioNTech is better or whatever they're reporting on. The biggest problem is going to be journalists, number one, not wanting to go into journalism because they think it's too sensitive, or number two, the working journalist just deciding, we don't want to go there. It's just some certain topics may be too sensitive. But I always say, look, the most strict regime for journalists I can think of is mainland China, other than North Korea or Eritrea. I think they're in Turkmenistan. I think on the Reporters Without Borders Index you mentioned, China's like 177, so there's only out of 180. So I think Eritrea, Turkmenistan, and maybe North Korea are 78, 79, and 180. But I mean, and I worked in China. I was in Beijing. I lived in Shanghai. It's one of the most strict places for journalists to work. But you still see good journalism coming out of China. You still see reporting about Xinjiang. You still see reporting about human rights cases coming out. You still see reporting about corruption cases. So journalists have learned how to operate within the existing red lines in a place like China. Journalists can operate in Thailand knowing that they have very strict defamation laws, very strict laws on lèse-majesté or insulting the king. Journalists still figured out ways to operate and tell stories. Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia still has very active press corps reporting about Hun Sen. Myanmar, obviously they're in the civil strife now, but I mean, we knew about the Rohingya and the massacres going on there by the army because of some tough reporting from Myanmar Times and Irrawaddy and and then some of the Mizima and some of the other new media outlets that have opened. So you can still do good journalism even under stricter conditions as there now are.
So you don't think Hong Kong is a very difficult place for journalists to operate?
Oh, it's becoming more difficult for journalists to operate, absolutely. But I think journalists here need to have a kind of a mental adjustment. It's not like it used to be. It used to be easy and open and everybody here talked to you and it was an easy way to do it. Look at it more like reporting from Myanmar or Thailand or even mainland China. It's still more open than those places to report. Now, I have heard from friends and colleagues, etc., that it's a lot more difficult to talk to people they used to talk to just 2 years ago. Some people have said that their past sources have been ringing them up and saying, hey, do me a favor, erase my contacts out of your phone. Don't call. I had someone say, someone they used to talk to on a regular basis rang them and said, I love you, you're great, just don't ever call me again. Literally, don't ever call me again, don't ever call me again.
I call you, don't call me.
I'll call you, don't ever call me again. I mean, some of the student leaders who were out there during the protest movement are saying, please don't ever call me. Please take my contacts out of the phone. I mean, I'm hearing that a lot.
Really?
So that's happening. Yeah, so it's going to become
terrible.
Look, that happened all the time in mainland China, so it didn't surprise me that.
So now we're more and more like mainland China.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. But so I guess that's the shock of it all is that I was, as I mentioned, I was in Beijing, I was in Shanghai, I was in there about 3.5 years, something like that, from end of 2009 until January 2013. And I used to come back and forth to Hong Kong. I'd see you occasionally during that period. When you'd been in China for like a couple of months reporting, you cross that border. Either you fly into the new airport or you cross the border and you come into Hong Kong, and you just breathe a sigh of relief. You just, oh God, now it's so much more open here now. Everybody, you can talk openly about things now.
Not anymore, huh?
That's what's changing is you no longer have that kind of. You don't just come to Hong Kong and go, wow, now everything's open here. I can talk to anybody.
What about at the university? The student union doesn't exist anymore. Huh? What the hell?
I'm not really involved in the university.
But you know vaguely.
I know vaguely, that they are no longer going to collect the dues for them, and
so they can't function without the money, without the facilities.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't talked. I know a couple people there because we've met at some panels, so I need to call them and find out what's going on. It's become difficult because there was this campaign against the student union in some of the media. Some of the pro-China media was saying, how can you have this student union that's done X, Y, and Z? So I think there was a lot of pressure on to take some kind of action against them. But I do need to check and see how they're doing, if they're going to try to reform it somewhere else in their own facility or some sort. There's still other student clubs there, some of which came underneath the student union. Like I'm in the social sciences faculty. There's still a social sciences student group.
That continues.
Well, as far as we know, that continues. It's only just the kind of umbrella student union. So I don't want to say too much more about it because I don't really know the background.
But for us, from the outside, we think we can see that it seems that freedom, academic freedom, and all that is shrinking, and people are also getting more and more scared and self-censoring within the university.
It could be. I mean, I know within my faculty, social sciences, our dean has been saying. Same thing I've been saying to my students, so I actually get it from my boss and I relay it to my students. We're saying, don't self-censor.
Really?
Full steam ahead. We'll let you know if you're going over the line on something, but the worst thing that can happen is if you start reining it in yourself. Now, I mean, obviously, everybody's thinking about it. Oh my God, I'm not going to, I don't want to violate the law here. But you have to, at least, I assume everybody in Hong Kong and the police and then the national security apparatus, I presume they're being reasonable. I presume
that's a very big presumption.
I presume they're being reasonable. I presume they're looking for people who are actively violating national security in some way. They might interpret that broadly or whatever, but I assume they're not looking at someone who accidentally, inadvertently, while speaking, says, "Oh, a lot of countries like South Korea and Taiwan, have been able to control the virus." Somebody could say, "You call Taiwan a country." You said countries like South Korea and Taiwan. Aha, I'm going to report you to national security. Now,
some members of my party have been arrested for taking part in the primary election.
Well, that is true too.
Yeah.
Well, again,
and locked up and not given bail.
Yes, I know.
That really make people very frightened and very concerned.
That does make people frightened and concerned. But as I said, you know, a lecturer giving a lecture who might make an inadvertent slip of the tongue or say something that's unintended is not the same as participating in politics, etc. And the other thing you have to worry about is again, I don't know anything about how the national security apparatus works or anything like that, but I'm sure they're not going to come knocking on some professor's door because he referred to Hong Kong and mainland China. And some student took offense saying Hong Kong is a part of China and you said Hong Kong and mainland China, so therefore I'm going to report you. I am convinced that because they have this new hotline set up.
Yeah, they said they got
100,000.
Yeah.
I call it the snitch line. Now, I'm sure anytime some girl sees her boy out with another girl kissing, she's going to call the hotline and say, I heard him chanting 5 demands, not one less. Or anytime a student plagiarizes a paper and I'm going to give him an F on the paper, I'm sure he's going to call the snitch line and say, I heard him saying subversive things, blah, blah, blah. So they must have ways to filter out the nonsense from the real things that they're looking for, which are real national security violations.
But some teachers said they're very scared that there are students taking notes about lecturers.
There could be, yeah. I mean, I know it.
To report.
Yeah.
Maybe not calling up the snitch line, but so, or vice versa, the teacher taking notes.
I'm sure.
This happened in mainland China, isn't it?
It happens all the time in mainland China. It happened in Australia. It happened in the UK, where professors say they're afraid to record things. If we've over the last year we've had to do a lot of our classes on Zoom because of the COVID thing. But a lot of times, you kind of say, well, maybe we won't record this one, or maybe the speaker wants to be off the record, so we won't record this Zoom. They've started to say that in some cases, because we have some students who are in China. Maybe some students coming from mainland China, we don't require them to actually use their name on the sign-in for the Zoom, if they're not comfortable with it. There are some materials that maybe instructors don't feel comfortable putting on the online platform if students need to access it from mainland China. It's always a bit tricky because, remember what I said earlier, everybody has to obey the law. Yeah. And so in China, I think it's illegal to use a VPN. And so we can't tell students, if they do, I can't tell students to use a VPN to access some material that I need them to read. So if they can't get it on their own, we have to figure out something else. So everybody has to obey the law.
Yeah, well, anyway, Keith, thank you very much for coming on and sharing with us your views.
Well, thank you for having me.
We hope that you can help the journalistic community and also encourage our young students to not to just give up.
They shouldn't give up, and we need best practices, journalism here, fact-based, accurate journalism to fight this, accusation of disinformation. They have to be accurate, they have to be good, they have to be in-depth, they have to tell both sides, always, telling both sides of the story. Those are best practices journalism. That should be what the police and the Hong Kong government and the liaison office and MOFA want. They should want fact-based, accurate, both sides journalism.
And you should, work with the local journalists association to tell the administration to respect, the operation of the media.
Absolutely, absolutely. Media is important, and I think we recognize how important media is when we look around and see. Think about it, if we had open media in China, which we don't, but if you had open media in China at the end of 2009, when the first COVID cases were being reported, if journalists were allowed to interview doctors and report what was going on, and you had an open media, we might have known what was going on a couple weeks earlier than we did, instead of news being suppressed.
Yeah, you should tell the WHO team that's investigating COVID. Anyway, thank you very much, Keith.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, any question for Professor?
Hi. This is Karen from the Economic Journal.
Hi, Sandy.
How do you see the future of journalism or press freedom in Hong Kong, provided that the government is going to implement the fake news law?
Yeah, I try to be optimistic because I teach students, so I want them to stay optimistic. But again, it's going to be tougher. It's going to be a lot tougher for journalists to operate here. There's going to be a lot less public information, a lot less open data, a lot more scrutiny of what journalists write. But on the other hand, as I said, there's still room. There's still room, but journalists are going to have to learn where the red lines are, what the space is that you can operate in. As I mentioned, journalists in China operate under still much tougher conditions than they do here in Hong Kong, but I still see good journalism coming out of China. I saw some really fascinating stuff coming out of, I wish I could read more Chinese than I can, but I see, Six Tone does really good stuff. Kai-Shin still does really good stuff. The foreign journalists there, still really do good stuff. BBC and New York Times did some great stuff about Xinjiang. So if they can do that out of China, which is the most strict place possible, you can still do things in Hong Kong where there are still people like Emily Lau you can talk to, people who are still openly criticizing things and telling you what's really going on. So yeah, so it's again, the future is not going to be the same as the past, is what I can say. So if people keep looking back and say, but we used to be able to do this and it used to be so free, forget that. But just look at where you are and still think you're still lucky because you're not working for the Guangdong Daily, you're working for Hong Kong Economic Times. You can still do good stories here. It's getting tighter and tighter, definitely. It used to be this free, China's back free, Hong Kong's kind of now somewhere in the middle here, so there's still a lot to do.
Okay.
Anybody else?
No.
It's all journalists, different publications?
Different, yes. But these are mainly